Hello, welcome to episode 12 on the series of Introduction to Programming. We are going to take a look at a type of loop known as the for loop. These can be helpful when using arrays, as they work naturally with index-based access. Let's take a look. So, previously, we had defined an array using the square bracket syntax here. We can stick in a couple of values here, and so when we run this guy, nothing will happen. But if I print it out to the screen, one of the things you'll see is that it'll spit out the internals of our array definition with the comma separating each of the values. Now, if we wanted to spit out a single value, we can use our index access to print out the first value or the second value, or even, the third value, right? We can also replace this index access with a variable. And if I run this guy, it'll spit out number 0 because accessing index 0 is the number 0. But we can do a little bit better. We can use a new keyword here called for, which allows us to define a variable with a semicolon, followed by a condition, which we can say is as long as the index is below 4. And then we can do a increment operation at the end of the for loop. And so this is the standard way that you would write out a for loop. You have a definition followed by a semicolon, a condition followed by another semicolon, and then some sort of operator at the end to indicate how you would, or something you would like it to do after the loop. This is the equivalent of do action, and up here I can split that in to make it a little bit clearer. I can take this guy. Actually, let me just take this because we can get rid of that. And this. So these two, this for loop here and this while loop here, are exactly the same structure. In fact, if you basically compile down a for loop, it'll effectively get turned into the equivalent of this while loop down here. One of the reasons why people prefer for loops for this is it has a much more compact syntax, right? You can see that you define the whole thing in one line. Generally speaking, defining your variable, not that important. Your condition, for the most part, is going to be relatively simple, and the increment operation is also a very simple and repeatable action that you would perform when looping over an array structure. So again, if I go and print this guy out here, and I can put this guy here, if I run it, we will see that it will print out the array twice, again, because it's going to do it for the for loop, and then it's going to also do it down here. You can see that it does the same thing in both cases, right? I can comment out this code here. You can see that it just runs it once. If I uncomment this out, it'll run it twice. Now, for loops can be pretty powerful because they can very easily be adapted to whatever array value you pass them. Typically, one of the things you'll do is you'll do dot length. So we basically are going to use our dot operator here on our array x variable, and we're going to tell it to give us the length of it. And so if I run this again, it's going to spit out all of the values in our array. If I add another value into the array, what it'll do is it'll spit out the next value in the array because it'll adjust its condition based on the size of the array that you pass into it. Again, if I also pass in an array with 3 values, it'll spit out the 3 values. And so instead of hard coding the number that you want here, you'll often just put in the length of the array. And so this is very common if you're iterating through an array structure. There is other ways that we can do it, but for now, I'm just going to focus on the actual for loop syntax. One of the other fun things that you can do with this is instead of doing the increment operator here, we could do +2. Right, and so if I actually specify a few more variables here, just to make it clear what we're doing, when I run this, you'll see that it prints out every even number because the index starts at 0, which is this guy. In each iteration, we're going to increase by 2. And you'll see that it'll spit out each of the ones that here. If we say wanted to start at our second element, we would change the initial value to be 1. And if I run this, it'll spit out 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Right? So you can get some flexibility with a for loop construct because by very easily changing a couple values, you can get the iteration to happen differently. Another way that we could deal with this is we can iterate backwards. And so as long as index is greater than or equal to 0, and we start at our length, and we'll say length minus 1, and there's a very specific reason for that I will get to in a moment. We would like to print out every single value going downwards, right? We're going to decrement it. So it basically reverses the iteration so that it spits out every single value starting at the last one, because we told the index to start at length minus 1. And then we're going to keep going down by 1 until the index is less than 0, in which case that's when it will exit out of our loop. All right, so we can iterate backwards through a loop. Right? We can also iterate backwards by 2. If I run this, you'll see that it goes 9, 7, 5, 3, 1. Right? Very powerful construct here. It very easily allows us to set our condition, very easily allows us to set where we want to start and how we want to change our values over time. And so you can get a lot done when you're dealing with arrays and using a for loop. For loops are a common construct in JavaScript when working with arrays. We will explore other ways that we can work with arrays in future videos. Have a good day.